So here we are again with that darn book 5. It's, dark sun, 7 days of black fire, planets clearing the stage. You almost get a picture. I don't know what a dark sun would be, but dark suns and planets clearing the stage sounds like one of those flood things. It sounds like one of those flood things. Legends. Didn't we have a legend about fire destroying the earth one time? If you do a lot of legend reading, you'll run across those things. Book 5. And then they go on and say, okay, next chapter is the second covenant. Okay, first covenant didn't work. First covenant got messed up, and nobody has figured out that the archangel isn't altogether in 100% support. But, as they say, there was a suspicion on the parts of the Son of Light that not all was right with the Earth's archangel. But it seemed to be most helpful with the new agreement or covenant. So they kind of thought maybe there's something wrong with the archangel. But here we're going for the second covenant, and this archangel is very helpful. And what was the covenant? The covenant contained these conditions. First, all incarnations by the soul would be allowed to enter only the monkey form now. That one called man, what we call man now. No more cyclopses, no more mermaids, no more giants. Only man-monkey. And that monkey would be clean, de-haired, and made more symmetrical. Clean, de-haired, and made more symmetrical, and they did this? That's what they say. That's what it says here. Symmetrical. De-haired, I can see. Cleaned up, but symmetrical? I'm not quite sure what that means, but probably somewhere in book 5. Now here's this monkey man that they've cleaned up, de-haired, made more symmetrical. There would be no more soul creations. No more anything except this man-monkey. Second part of the covenant was that there would be a system of education called karma, which would replace the law of cause and effect, which was for man only. This new law would make it possible the release of the soul's awareness back to the soul, and man would then thereby learn his way out. Each incarnation was to be in the form of a different view or sphere of influence or sign, as we might call it. What do they mean by that? Of course, I asked. That's a lot of words, and I didn't understand what they meant. They said each incarnation would be from a different view, sphere of influence, or sign. Sign what? Sun sign. Each incarnation you would come from a different sun sign. Inherent in that one little sentence is the understanding that coming from a different sun sign brings you from a different sphere of influence, which brings you from a different viewpoint. So in that one sentence, they said a bunch of things that you might have slid right over. I didn't slide over it. I says, what do you mean by that? What are you talking about here? That's different view, sphere of influence, signs. Those are 3 different things. So they said, okay, this is what that means. That way, and they went on, so you understand, each time you incarnated from a different sun sign, which was from a different sphere of influence. When they came in from a different place. Each sun sign comes in from a different place. Why do you think they're so different? And why do you think that the tendency is for those in a sun sign to be a little more similar than those that aren't in that sun sign? Because they're coming from a place exactly the same? No. Why not? Because each soul is different. Each soul already has this series of lives behind it. It's just influenced by this sphere of influence. It's only influence. It isn't changed totally. So is everybody from each sun sign the same? No. But they're influenced by this condition in this sphere of influence that relates to this sun sign. Thought that I just had, which might be worth investigating, is when we talked about the spheres of influence, it said read the book The Voyage to Arcturus. I wonder what sign that was. Maybe that'll be in book 5 too. I got to go back and read that book and then say what sign sounds like somebody had gone through that sphere of influence. So, anyway. So in each incarnation, they had to come from a different sphere of influence. And they said that way each person might see from all angles where it was and thereby come to the truth of its condition. So first they had to deal with being a monkey. And second they had to deal with karma, the law of cause and effect. And inherent in that they had to come from a different sphere of influence each time, and thereby see it from different angles. The third, they said, there would be much more control placed on these monkey men in terms of their ability to use their power. The soul's awareness was restricted to the single problem of being a man and learning those things that would allow the man to get out of this trap. So his awareness powers would be forgotten, and they were kind of erased. So he had constantly be seeking these powers, and they were just taken right out of the awareness. So now this monkey man would begin a new cycle with karma as their teacher and death and the sphere of influences on a more regular basis. What does that mean? They would die more often. They were living to ripe old ages. Well, they weren't going to do that as much anymore. It was going to be quicker. Now, if we were to believe what the Bible says, some of these people before the flood lived 1,000 years maybe. That would have been old, but 1,000 years, 800 years, 600 years, and we're lucky if we live 100, or maybe not lucky if we live 100. Obviously, there's a time discrepancy there somewhere, but even back at this change in the cycle, they're limiting the length of time that they live so that they have a more regular change in the sphere of influence, a more regular change in their personality, and so on and so forth. And the fourth condition was the constant influence of those of the White Brotherhood, the higher powers, and the Archangel working to influence this man now toward the path intended. This influence would take many forms, and again there was that influences of those three, the White Brotherhood, the higher powers, and the Archangel. That influence would take many forms, and again were the cause of those things that seem so confusing in our history. And right away we say, what do you mean? What about the White Brotherhood, the higher powers, and the Archangel caused those things that seem confusing in history? And they said more in Book 5. I'm not going to tell you here. It's not enough time here. Book 5 will tell you. So then they go on and say, okay, this covenant was put into effect and the results were monitored. Why monitored? Because they weren't sure about the Archangel. And they go on and say the souls were learning and moving on as designed. Still, something was wrong. It seemed that perhaps the Archangel was not in total agreement with the end result of the plan. It seemed that it was moving in another direction. It was not an easy thing to determine. In the side note, they say, all of the conditions so far named work well for the Archangel's plan. The Archangel, would look much more powerful and godlike as the monkey man made the comparison between it and man. That's the side note. What do they say? If the Archangel had changed what it was trying to get accomplished and really wanted man to stay on earth and worship it, then removing its ability to be a mermaid or a cyclops or a giant or a magic man or whatever, and making it become a man worked for the Archangel's benefit. Remember when the Archangel was said to be real helpful of the second covenant? And why not? You're making man lesser, less powerful. You're taking magic away from him and you put him in a training ground. All those things work to the Archangel's advantage if the Archangel really wanted to keep the man's soul here and have it worship him. So they go on and say, the Archangel was becoming clever, and its methods were many and varied. Still, in examining the results of its action, it was determined that the Archangel was, in truth, moving to another plan. So they did figure it out. So then the White Brotherhood figured it out. Said, uh-oh, something wrong here.